When practicing anapanasati, can I combine body scanning with breathing in and breathing out? I find this helps keep my mind from discursive thinking. Or should I try harder to stay in just one area of the breath? So everybody's body and mind is functioning slightly differently in terms of how we perceive it due to our past, our character inclination, our character tendencies. So some people find that the mind becomes peaceful while observing the breath, tip of the nose area, top lip, other people heart area, other people abdomen area, other people noticing the whole body of breath, those three areas. Other people, they need to kind of observe the breath from a broader space and be aware of the whole body while aware of the in and out breath. And basically, whatever works is okay. And so you experiment a bit, and then whichever manner that allows you to be mindful of the breath most consistently is the right one. And as can happen as meditation progresses, the perception of the breath, if peacefulness becomes more palpable, the perception of the breath can fall away. Then one takes the peacefulness itself as the object and just stay still, stay peaceful. When the awareness of the breath comes back, pick up that awareness of breathing. So it's fine. If that's what works, that's fine. For myself, I observe the nose, chest, abdomen for a couple of minutes. Then normally it settles in the heart area. That's how it works for me. And it's perceived more as a kind of a sphere that expands and contracts rather than a nose-lungs thing. It's the felt experience of being mindful of those feelings. Dear Ajahn, yesterday I was getting some peaceful sits. The body calmed down considerably. However, there was a tinge of background suffering, unsatisfactoriness. Do you recommend that I endure and continue? If you have just a tinge of unsatisfactoriness, you are fortunate among beings. I recommend that you continue. Yes. I still have a tinge of unsatisfactoriness myself, after 27 years, and I'm continuing. So it's not until one is liberated as an arahant that there is no grasping at unconditioned phenomenon. So I encourage you, please continue. Dear Ajahn, as a layperson trying to follow the Buddha's path, do I need to undertake the vow of training in the 5 precepts every morning? I do recite going for a refuge every morning, but have not been consistent in reciting the vow to undertake the training in the 5 precepts. Does the merit become less impactful if the precepts were kept throughout the waking hours, but were not recited? At the start of the day, thank you, I just want to cover all the bases. So, it's an interesting question. I would say once a week would be a good standard. It's on the Uposatha day would be a good standard. You do a bit more chanting on the lunar observance day, or if that doesn't work for you, your work schedule, it can be a Sunday, a Saturday, whatever your day off is. In terms of reciting it daily, it's making positive imprints with the Buddhist traditions. Everything we do has some connotations or implications. So I know some people do. Some people recite these precepts every morning just because it gives them a sense of they have their refuge, they have their foundation of virtue, they're just reaffirming it every day, gives them dignity, self-respect, self-confidence, self-esteem. So it's wholesome, and it's probably a lot of modern people have limited time, so I tend to encourage people to chant the things that uplift the mind. So people have a favorite chant that makes their mind feel bright and happy and is conducive to the mind becoming peaceful in meditation. I encourage people normally to do their favorite chants. If I think reciting it daily would be more beneficial for someone who breaks them more often. So if you have a challenge where you're breaking them more often, then I think daily recitation would be helpful, because then you're reminding yourself every day, this is the standard to be a true human being. And that's how Ajahn describes it. The standard of being truly human is 5 precepts. If a person has a human body but not the 5 precepts, they're not yet fully human, according to the standard of the noble ones. When a person keeps the 8 precepts, meditates, has more metta, forgiveness, patience, that's like being a deva. With a human body, people's minds are on different levels. So the great Ajahns can see these things, the ones who have the purified divine eye. They can see what realm a person's mind is hanging out on. So it's good to polish your aura before visiting your Ajahns. So if it uplifts you, do it. If you're keeping the precepts quite strictly, then 1 pra, or once a week, just to remind ourselves. It's always things, good standards can degenerate, so it's always good to kind of check in. I think once a week is a good standard, because, okay, have I kept them? The right speech one is tricky. Musawada, some people like to think it's just lying. It's not just lying, it's harsh speech, divisive speech, exaggerating, all sorts of areas where most of us could remind ourselves of what the standards of noble speech is. So on that level, musawada is the intoxication one as well. It's not just alcohol and substances that lead to intoxication these days. It could be a violent computer game, pornography, any number of other addictions that cause the mind to lose its balance. So it's good to have a look. How are my standards in the area of intoxication? Am I keeping the mind calm, centered, sober, sane? Or am I stimulating it in unwholesome ways? Dear Ajahn, you mentioned in your Dhamma talk that once the mind has glimpsed not self, it gives rise to unshakable faith. The doubt is still active in other ways. This sounds like stream entry. Is that what you were saying? If not, what is the difference? So yes, I probably should qualify. If a person begins to have the vipassana jnana, glimpsing any of the 3 characteristics very clearly, anicca, and there's a sense of self falling away, and a very lovely, pristine sense of clarity that knows things more truthfully, that will give strong to deep faith, strong faith, conviction. It's not yet the unshakable faith. So the unshakable faith comes from the stream entry experience. And the stream entry experience, from what I've been told from my teachers, usually includes an experience of nibbana, the liberated state. And the practitioner knows, because the practitioner must have very good mindfulness to experience that, the practitioner knows what they were doing that led to the insight. So then that's why they end up having no doubt as to the correct way to practice. They know what practice they were doing, they know what insight they had that led to the letting go of the delusion and glimpsing the superior reality. And because it is devoid of all suffering and profoundly peaceful, Nibbana is superior, say the wise, Lord Buddha's statement in the Yawada Patimokkha, then there's no doubt in the superiority of Nibbana. A practitioner has faith in Buddha, the Lord Buddha's enlightenment, because the liberation is similar, and has faith in the practices and the teachings that lead to that insight, that liberation. So the stream enterer has experienced something that isn't self. So they understand that the self view is a view. So they've seen through it. Doesn't mean it completely goes away. It's not until after anagami that the subtle vanities of perceiving the mind and the body as self. So as it goes, the stream entry, unshakable faith in Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, understanding that rites and rituals are not what leads to the liberated state, but mindfulness, concentration and wisdom are, the Eightfold Path. And so that is when faith becomes unshakable. Apparently, on the Bodhisattva path, once a Bodhisattva has reached the third level of the 10 bhumis, that they also have unshakable faith. And a Bodhisattva practitioner, if it's a real one, will have trained under Buddhas, will have met several Buddhas, and will have developed wisdom, parami. And Tanajan also explains that it's possible to have a temporary liberation where a person experiences nibbana, but the mind doesn't flip over into nibbana, which is what happens with the stream entry experience. The reason the mind doesn't flip over into nibbana is because the person is still attached to the welfare of all the beings that they vowed to save. So it pulls it back. But the well-practicing Mahayana, Vajrayana practitioner can experience ultimate emptiness, but they have more than 7 lives. That's not said in the Theravada Suttas. I've heard that from my Mahayana and Vajrayana teachers. But some people here have bodhisattva vows, so I mention it. Dear Ajahn, reactivity, anger and irritability. How should one deal with these issues, especially at home? So, in general, beings have character traits, and you can broadly separate them into 3 groups. There's the greed types, of which I am proudly one. I'm not proud, I'm ashamed. People say, your monastery is so beautiful. I say, I'm sorry. Yeah. For me, it's like there's no point doing it if it's not going to be beautiful. This is latent tendencies depending on the things that we've liked and the things that, there's the aversive type. So the greed type is more likely to deal with their suffering by hankering and fantasizing and planning on getting pleasures. We try to manage our suffering with delicious food, nice smells, nice tastes, nice sights, nice sounds. And it doesn't work. But that's our style. The aversive type, the irritated type, they try to manage their suffering by getting angry at themselves and everybody else. That also doesn't work. Then the deluded type, which is the most difficult to work with, is probably the cause of the deluded type the root cause is probably intoxication. So if someone suffers and they take to the bottle, they suffer and they have another joint, kind of dulling their intelligence instead of cultivating their intelligence. We're talking about past life habits and getting lost in... And then the deluded type is the slowest to progress, tends to doubt about everything, and a lot of confusion. The deluded types are recommended to stay close to their teachers, so their teachers can keep an eye on them. So it's good to know what general character type you have. So if you're the deluded type, you'll be just having lots of doubts about everything all the time. Then that means you're probably the deluded type. If you, and we all have all of them, so it's like we all have plenty of each, but it's just most people have more of one than the other. So if you are an aversive type, then it's not a quick fix, because you're talking about the thousands and millions of lives that came before that conditioned this mode of relating to the world. One of the things that you can do and should do, because Lord Buddha recommends this for the aversive type, is cultivate loving kindness daily. So probably you want the first 10 to 15 minutes of every meditation session, especially in the morning. When you establish metta in the heart, metta has this quality of being able to lovingly accept things as they are. It will put just a little bit of spaciousness around when the irritating feeling comes, and the tendency to be, it puts a bit of space there. And then of course we get skilled at cultivating loving kindness for greater numbers of beings, neutral beings. But if you do this daily, it really does take some momentum. And one of the things that you can do, if a person gets skilled at holding metta in their own citta, in their own heart-mind, what happens is when your suffering arises because of irritation, you can immediately go to may I be well, may I be happy, may I be well, may I be happy. You spread loving kindness to yourself because in that moment you have suffering. And so you're addressing the suffering directly. It's called replacement by opposites. You're bathing the negative mind state out of the mind with a wholesome mind state. We can become adept at this. And I think it's one of the things that a lot of teachers and a lot of abbots have to become somewhat adept at, because there's always going to be someone not quite doing the right thing. But if you walk around scolding everybody all the time, you're going to end up living alone. So you have to train in seeing the annoying thing and not getting annoyed. Seeing the annoying person and not being annoyed. But how do you do that? You train in bringing loving kindness into your own heart. You spread loving kindness to yourself when there's some experience of suffering, and then you radiate it outwards afterwards. And cultivating metta has enormous benefits because then you have choice. When you have less reactivity, you have choice about how you react, when you react. And that's enormously helpful. It may be the case if someone keeps doing an annoying thing, maybe you have to say something, or an inappropriate thing, maybe you have to say something. But then you can ask yourself, what time would be the best time? Our teachers always warn us at Wat Nanachat and junior monks, if you have a problem with another monk, don't criticize them before the meal. Don't comment, Venerable, may I give you an admonishment? Say, never do it after the meal. Never do it after an all-night sitting, if someone was doing the all-night sitting practice. Try to speak to them without irritation and aversion in your tone, and to ask them, is this a good time, may I speak to you? Probably the hardest part is the person, in the recommendations for right speech, the person giving the admonishment is also supposed to be free of their fault, so that becomes tricky, because nobody likes hypocrisy. But we do our best. We try to find the right time, ask permission, say it in a nice way, consider a thoughtful way to say it. And loving kindness helps us tremendously with that. And of course, you give someone feedback and they have a really bad reaction, and you have to have metta for yourself again. It didn't work. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Dear Ajahn, I have followed your... having talked about the deluded type, I should also talk about the aversive type and the greed type. So the deluded type is supposed to live closer to their teacher or hear teachings frequently. It's probably better not to have too many teachers if you're the type that doubts a lot, because you'll always be comparing this teacher's teachings to that teacher's teachings. It's probably better to commit to one and check in and follow the advice. For the aversive type, they have to cultivate the metta. For the greed type, they are supposed to do body contemplation. Lord Buddha recommended that they visit charnel grounds, live in cemeteries for periods of time. So following Lord Buddha's advice, I have seen, I think, probably close to 20 autopsies. I have dragged myself to the autopsy room and forced myself to look at bones and blood and guts and brains, all of that good stuff. And it's helpful. So if any lust arises, one can bring to mind that occasion. I remember the first couple of times I went to autopsies, it's just kind of like, my mantra for the first 5 minutes is, don't throw up, don't throw up. Because the smell, when they cut open the stomach, is really something else. And then your face goes pale and the sweat comes on your brow, blood draws from your face. But then you have to pay attention. But the first few times it's all just, they start with I think they start from the head down. No, they start here. They draw a big line from the throat down to the tummy, and they need to check, and they cut chunk of chest plate off, and then we'll take out the heart and have a look at that. And this is when they need to see what was the cause of death. So a good mortician will be able to tell. Sometimes someone was murdered but thrown in the water. You need the autopsy to see, did they drown before? Did they drown really? Or were they killed by something else, that kind of thing? Were they poisoned? Or did they, So they can do these things. They check the liver, they check the kidney, in suspicious deaths. So, but you see the heart, the lungs, the liver, the kidneys, they usually take the brain out and then they put it back in here when they sew it all back up. They just throw it all back in and stitch it up. And so we're very fortunate that we're able to see that in this country. You have to write a letter and ask permission, go and be respectful, spread metta, of course, share merit to the person who becomes your study object. And yes, so the first couple of times, it's all just it's a bit traumatic actually. So when I had to train myself, when you go in this time, you're going to pay attention just to blood. One young man had an appendix burst, and he had most of his blood was in his cavity of his abdomen, so they're scooping out with a soup ladle just liters and liters of blood. So I really paid attention. Lohitang, 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 blood. And then another time the bone, because they take a grinder. In the old days they used to use a hacksaw, and there wasn't any glass. I remember once this little bit of bone came, yep, in the mouth. So future occasions I had a little cloth. But that's a nice smell in it. Learning the skills of attending autopsies. And but lately they've actually put some glass up, and they're probably a bit more concerned about not catching diseases and things as Thailand becomes more developed. But on subsequent occasions, I paid attention to that bone soaring. And the last time they just use an angle grinder that you cut floor tiles with. There's a particular noise, like cracking a big nut. But anyway, I don't know if you want this many details, but you are doing an intensive Theravadan meditation retreat, so we have to talk about bones. And so another occasion looking at those bones and really committing it to memory, so that now I can actually remember that gentleman who died of appendicitis. I can remember the guy that was shot behind. I can remember his bones and train myself. So if lust arises, I can bring to mind those occasions, and it is helpful. In general, the aversive types are supposed to live somewhere beautiful with nice people, nice food, nice weather, and cultivate a lot of metta, because getting angry and irritated and reactive all the time isn't going to be helpful for developing insight. And then the greedy types, the sensual types, are supposed to live with horrible, smelly people, and eat bad food, and I can't bring myself to do that yet, but it's a long-term program. And what's very interesting to notice is that the aversive types tend to like more austerities, and the greed types tend to like the Brahmaviharas. They want to develop the metta, the compassion, the mudita, the devanusati, even though the Buddha said corpses, death. And the aversion type is supposed to do metta. No, I want to have patched robes, I want to be cold at night and hot in the day and be bitten by bugs or whatever. It's people have their latent tendencies. So, but to whatever degree we can apply Lord Buddha's advice, if you are an aversive type, cultivating a lot of metta will pacify to some degree your reactivity. If you are a greed type, you do have to think about the nature of bodies and try to cut back on sensuality. If you're a deluded type, you need to check in with your teacher and see how things are going. So we all have all of them, and what do they say? Life is a mixed box of chocolates. We all have our things we love, the things we hate. A really large part of practice, Ajahn Anan is saying all the time, keep the mind in the middle. Mai yin di, mai yin lai. He asked Ajahn Chah, is there a shortcut in practice? And Ajahn Chah said, well, if you know what the shortcut is, try to keep your mind in the middle. So that means not being swayed by liking and disliking. And Luang Por Chah would also give them mai nair, that advice of when you're having a reaction to just remind yourself, it's not sure. You're having another reaction, yeah, it's not sure. That sense of self-righteousness comes up, I am right. Yeah, maybe not. That kind of constantly not grasping at that sense of righteousness and confidence and believing your own thoughts. Okay, maybe not. And then, of course, being able to keep the mind in the middle does depend on having a certain amount of mindfulness and a certain amount of awareness of what's going on in the mind. So this is where the frequent meditation is helpful, especially in the morning, that you establish more presence of mind, more clarity, and then that's what you carry into your day. Luang Por Chah has that beautiful analogy of sitting in the chair of the mind. When he talks about that which knows, in Thai we call puru. It's the knowing. If one gets the knowing, mindfulness and clear comprehension established and functioning well enough in the mind, that is what one is holding in the mind. One holds mindfulness in the mind. Other sense impressions, other impingements come, but Luang Por Chah explains it that they're not able to sit on the chair. They don't invade the mind, they don't fully take over. That which knows them as they are sees them come in and sees them leave. So that's what we try to cultivate, a consistent sense of knowing, have a consistent sense of presence of mind, not allowing the mind to sway too far left, too far right, into craving for and craving not for. So meditation retreats are a very good opportunity to have more of an opportunity to do that, establish the frequency of the sittings. A couple of sits in the morning, a couple of sits in the afternoon, a couple of sits in the evening, some walking. This is getting the opportunity to cultivate a more consistent and more sturdy quality of mindfulness. So when we have that, we can see, it is possible to not allow the mind to become fully taken over by mind states. We can see them beginning to arise and not feed them, allow them to cease. And when we do this, of course, when mind states don't fully invade the mind, when we incline the mind to a meditation object, it's more able to stay with that meditation object. And then you can experience some collectedness, some right samadhi, samma samadhi. So I rejoice in your efforts thus far, and I encourage you to keep up with them. So a person was asking, how do we do death awareness meditation? Sorry, last question. How do we do death awareness meditation in the context of a retreat? So you can do a death meditation whenever you want to, and in any of the formal sits, you can do your death contemplation. So if you find that helpful. Sometimes when you have quieter circumstances, it is a time to pick up a reflective meditation that you're interested in and deepen it. And so you just ask yourself truthfully, how may I die today? You have to be careful because you don't want to go into endless abstract proliferation. You do want to keep your contemplation within the track of the contemplation. So just what are some of the simple ways that you might die? That the car could crash. I think there's 50,000 people die a year in Thailand from car crashes. It's not always them, what the other person's doing. You could fall over in the bathroom. I hope you don't. You could get bitten by a snake. You could have a cerebral aneurysm. Both my grandfather and my father seem to be genetically prone. I think my grandfather was only 60, stood up, took a few steps, fell down on the floor dead. He had a big aneurysm in his brain. My mother noticed the symptoms when it started happening to my father, so she called the ambulance, and he had surgery to remove the blood. But it really is possible. Many of us, these bodies are ticking time bombs. We don't know what we have in us that could suddenly go wrong. And strokes, etc., heart attacks. So a heart attack is possible. An aneurysm is possible. And a snake is possible. A spider is possible. Maybe less possible in Thailand, more possible in Australia. But there are manifold ways that a person can die. And so we sincerely consider that. And so ask myself, could I die from a snake bite today? Yeah, I could. And you allow the mind to be sobered. Breathing in maranang, breathing out maranang, aware of death. Is it possible that something could go wrong with my body today? Yes, it is. Breathing in maranang, breathing out maranang. And sometimes you imagine the actual scenario, okay? See yourself fallen over in the bathroom with your head hit and unconscious. Breathing in maranang, breathing out maranang. It's like see the car crashing, your car spinning down the hill. Maranang, maranang. You have to do this with some calmness. You're not trying to traumatize yourself. You're just trying to, in my series of guided meditations on death and dying, you'll notice that the voice is very calm, it's very step by step. It's not trying to freak anybody out. It's more just acknowledging that it really is possible. I have one student in a local village that was taking a bus to Chiang Wat Loi, I think, and some kind of Buddhist excursion, big coach, and it rolled over a couple of times on a slippery road, and she had dead people left and right of her. So it's just a few kilometres away from the village. So they're getting up in the morning, leaving at 4 a.m. or whatever it was. And sometimes these roads, because they have trucks going over them, the trucks drop oil, and if there's a little bit of damp on the road becomes really slippery, and trucks, cars, buses slide off roads or turn over. So what's very interesting was she was chanting it to be so. She was chanting it to be so, and she was very committed to a morning chanting practice. So she was doing her morning chanting on the bus just quietly. The bus slipped, rolled a couple of times. I don't know the exact details, but I know that many people died, and I know that she didn't. So it really is possible these things happen. And so it's Marana Nusatri is just more like paying attention to the truth, and which lessens the delusion in the mind that death really is possible at any moment on any day. And then the desired result is just a sense of sobriety. And one of the other results is that we tend to live life more skillfully, being aware that we might not have as long as we hope. Then we don't want to leave unfinished business, we don't want to be unskillful, live more carefully. So similarly with metta, if people, what I've said about the hindrances and about the character types now, you can ask yourself, which one do you think you are? You have a few more days, so you can do. If you are very greedy, very sensual, you can do some body contemplation. If you are aversive and irritated, you can do more metta, and really learn to hold that in the heart and spread it outwards to more and more beings. If you are deluded and confused, you can, in terms of practice, we want to notice anicca, dukkha, anatta. If you keep it really simple, if you notice the 3 characteristics, delusion will lessen, wisdom will increase. So I offer this for your reflection. We will sit meditation together now.